For almost 300 years, the great civilizations of the galaxy believed humanity had become weak and afraid. Human ships rarely traveled beyond their own borders, and Earth no longer answered insults or threats from powerful alien empires. Many worlds laughed at humans and called them cowards hiding behind old peace treaties. The Galactic Union believed humanity had lost its strength after the terrible solar collapse wars that nearly destroyed Earth long ago. While alien nations expanded their territories and built giant military fleets, humans stayed silent inside their own system. But hidden far beyond the outer colonies, deep inside the endless storms of Neptune, humanity was secretly building something so massive and terrifying that even their closest allies did not know it existed. Commander Jiho stood inside a dark observation room and watched giant construction platforms move through blue lightning storms outside the armored glass. His face remained calm, but even he still felt shocked every time he looked at the unfinished structure floating inside the clouds of Neptune. It was not simply a warship. It was an entire city built for war. The massive fortress stretched across hundreds of kilometers, covered with metal towers, shield generators, docking stations, factories, and rotating weapon rings larger than some moons. Millions of workers lived inside the fortress while construction never stopped for a single hour. Officially, the project did not exist. Every person working there had sworn loyalty to Project Aegis many years earlier. Beside Jiho stood Chief Engineer Hannah, a quiet woman whose brilliant designs had helped make the impossible fortress become reality. She studied glowing screens filled with energy readings while distant thunder shook the station around them. "Outer shield systems are stable," she said softly. "The gravity core is now operating above 98% efficiency." Jiho nodded slowly, but his eyes never left the enormous fortress outside. "How long until full activation?" he asked. Hannah paused before answering. 3 months if nothing goes wrong." Jiho gave a tired smile. Something always goes wrong. Far across the galaxy, however, no one suspected what humanity was preparing. Inside the shining capital world of the Galactic Union, alien senators argued endlessly about politics, trade routes, and border conflicts. Humanity was rarely mentioned anymore because most civilizations believed humans were no longer important. The powerful Varex Dominion openly mocked Earth during public meetings, calling humans the sleeping race. Their fleets had become the strongest military force in known space, and their rulers believed no species could challenge them. During one gathering, Admiral Kor of the Dominion laughed openly when a smaller species warned that strange human activity had been detected near Neptune. "Humans hiding in storms?" Kor joked loudly. "Perhaps they are building shelters because they fear real warriors." The Senate chamber filled with laughter. No one noticed the silent human ambassador leaving the room without a single word. Weeks later, strange signals began appearing near the outer edges of human space. Several unmanned probes sent by the Dominion vanished without explanation. Then a military scout ship disappeared completely after entering restricted territory near Neptune. The only thing recovered was a broken transmission filled with static and terrified voices. "It's moving," one voice whispered. "That's not a station, dear gods." Then the message ended with screams before the recording cut to silence. The Galactic Union became nervous, but Admiral Kor dismissed the event as an accident caused by Neptune's violent storms. He ordered another scout fleet into human territory despite warnings from his own officers. Meanwhile, inside the hidden fortress, Jiho and Hannah prepared for the final testing phase of Aegis. Massive transport ships moved endlessly through giant docking tunnels while workers rushed through crowded industrial districts inside the floating city. Unlike ordinary military bases, Aegis contained homes, schools, hospitals, farms, and entire neighborhoods beneath artificial skies. Children played inside parks while soldiers trained only kilometers away. Humanity had not built a fortress for a short war. They had built a city that could survive forever without a planet. Hannah walked through one of the lower civilian sectors as families watched giant construction drones flying overhead through transparent ceiling domes. Many civilians did not even fully understand why Aegis existed. They only knew humanity feared something terrible was coming someday. Old stories from the solar collapse wars spoke of unknown signals detected beyond the edge of the galaxy long ago. But those records remained heavily protected by military command. Deep underground beneath Aegis, hidden behind enormous blast doors, scientists studied ancient data recovered from black space beyond explored territory. Jiho entered the restricted chamber later that evening where Dr. Min waited beside a holographic star map. The old scientist looked exhausted after days without sleep. "The signals are getting stronger," Min said quietly. "Whatever sent them is still out there." Jiho crossed his arms. "Can we confirm they're moving closer?" Min hesitated before answering. "Yes." Silence filled the chamber. Jiho stared at the map while distant alarms echoed faintly through the massive fortress above them. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for a threat no one else believed existed. Project Aegis was not created because humans wanted power. It was created because they feared extinction. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across the chamber walls. Hannah's voice came through the communication system. "Commander, Dominion Scout Fleet detected entering restricted zone near Neptune." Jiho immediately turned toward the exit. "How many ships?" 8 military vessels. "Did they receive our warnings?" Hannah answered after a short pause. "Yes, they ignored them." Minutes later, the bridge of Aegis became alive with activity as officers rushed between control stations. Massive holograms displayed the approaching alien fleet moving through Neptune's storms. The Dominion ships were small compared to the enormous fortress hidden inside the clouds, but they carried enough firepower to destroy ordinary human colonies. Admiral Kor himself had ordered the mission, believing humans were hiding illegal military projects. Jiho stood at the center of the bridge while Hannah monitored shield systems nearby. "Keep Aegis hidden as long as possible," Jiho ordered calmly. "No weapons unless necessary." Outside the fortress, giant shield towers slowly powered up beneath layers of storm clouds. The Dominion fleet moved closer, completely unaware of the colossal structure beneath them. One alien captain suddenly reported strange readings across every sensor system. "Massive gravity distortions detected ahead," he warned nervously. Another officer laughed. "Probably another human mining station." But then the clouds parted. One by one, the alien ships emerged from Neptune's storms and froze in complete disbelief. Before them stood a dark metallic city so enormous it blocked entire sections of the planet beneath it. Endless towers rose through the clouds while rotating weapon rings surrounded the fortress like giant mechanical moons. Blue energy shields flickered across its surface as thousands of defense cannons slowly turned toward the tiny scout fleet. The alien crews stared in horror at something larger than anything ever built by known civilizations. One frightened officer whispered, "Impossible." Inside Aegis, Hannah watched the stunned enemy ships drifting motionless before them. "They're transmitting panic signals across open channels," she reported quietly. Jiho remained expressionless. Open communication. Moments later, the face of a terrified alien captain appeared on the central screen. His voice shook badly. What is this?" Jiho looked directly at him. "This is Aegis," he answered calmly. "Humanity's final defense." The alien captain tried to speak again, but another officer interrupted with frantic shouting as several sections of the fortress suddenly began moving. Giant armored plates unfolded across the surface while massive weapon systems powered online with deep vibrations that shook space itself. The alien fleet immediately turned to retreat, but powerful gravity fields locked their ships in place. Panic spread across every Dominion vessel. "Please!" the captain shouted desperately. "We were only sent to investigate." Jiho stared silently at the screen for several long seconds before finally speaking again. "Then return to your empire," he said coldly, "and tell them humanity is no longer hiding." The news about Aegis spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The surviving Dominion scout ships returned home carrying recordings of the giant floating fortress hidden inside Neptune's storms. And within days the Galactic Union fell into panic and confusion. Some leaders believed the footage was fake, while others demanded immediate answers from humanity. Entire governments accused Earth of secretly building a superweapon in violation of ancient treaties. But humanity remained silent. No explanations were given, no warnings were repeated, and no diplomats answered the growing fear spreading through alien space. Inside the Dominion capital, Admiral Kor stood before the ruling council while the image of Aegis floated above the chamber in glowing blue light. Even the proud military officers who once laughed at humanity now looked nervous. The fortress was unlike anything ever created before. It was not simply large. It looked unstoppable. Its weapon systems alone were bigger than ordinary warships, and the energy readings from its core exceeded entire planetary defense networks. One council member demanded immediate action before humanity built more fortresses like it. Another warned that attacking Earth could start a war the galaxy was not prepared to fight. But Admiral Kor refused to show fear. He believed humanity was bluffing. In his mind, no species would create such a machine unless they intended to scare their enemies into surrender. A weapon that large cannot move quickly, Kor said confidently. It is only a fortress hiding inside storms. Once our fleet surrounds it, humanity will beg for mercy. The council slowly agreed with him. Within hours, the Dominion ordered the largest military operation in its history. More than 400 warships gathered near the edge of human territory, led by Kor himself aboard the massive command ship Iron Blood. Across nearby systems, civilians watched endless lines of battleships enter hyperspace, while news channels predicted humanity's defeat before the war even began. Meanwhile, deep inside Aegis, Commander Jiho stood on a high balcony overlooking the enormous central district of the fortress city. Artificial sunlight shined across crowded streets filled with civilians moving through markets, schools, and transport stations. Millions of people lived normal lives inside Aegis despite the growing danger outside. Children ran through parks while giant military drones flew high above the city skyline. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for war, but they refused to abandon ordinary life. Hannah joined Jiho near the balcony railing, holding a data tablet filled with military reports. Dominion fleet entered the outer system 2 hours ago, she said quietly. Estimated arrival near Saturn in 11 hours. Jiho nodded slowly. Evacuation status? Civilian shelters are ready, but most residents already know what's coming. Jiho looked down at the streets below. Nobody was panicking. Nobody was running. That frightened him more than fear itself. Humanity had prepared for this moment for too long. In another section of Aegis, Captain Sora trained young defense pilots inside a massive combat simulator surrounded by holographic battle screens. Many of the recruits were barely adults, yet they moved with calm discipline while simulated enemy fleets attacked around them. Sora stopped beside one nervous pilot named Day and adjusted his targeting controls. "You're thinking too much," she told him. "Machines react faster than fear." Day swallowed hard. "Do you really think they'll attack?" Sora gave a cold smile. "They crossed half the galaxy with 400 warships. What do you think?" Before he could answer, warning sirens echoed through the training chamber. Across Aegis, giant screens suddenly activated with emergency alerts. Dominion fleet detected near Saturn orbit. All defense crews report immediately. Throughout the fortress city, civilians calmly moved toward protected shelters, while military personnel rushed toward combat stations. Massive armored barriers closed around important sectors while energy reactors deep inside Aegis began powering to maximum output. Far outside the fortress, the dark emptiness near Saturn slowly filled with hundreds of Dominion warships emerging from hyperspace. The massive fleet surrounded the planet like a metal storm. Admiral Kor stared proudly at the tactical display aboard Iron Blood while his officers prepared attack formations. "Any response from humanity?" he asked. "No surrender signals," an officer replied nervously. Kor smirked. "Then we teach them what happens when weak civilizations challenge the Dominion." Suddenly, alarms echoed across the bridge. One officer pointed toward the main screen with visible fear. Saturn's rings were moving. At first, Kor thought it was a sensor malfunction. Then enormous shadows slowly appeared between the glowing ice fields surrounding the planet. The Dominion fleet watched in disbelief as Aegis emerged from behind Saturn itself like a rising mechanical world. The giant fortress moved slowly at first, but its size made the sight horrifying beyond words. Endless towers, weapon rings, shield generators, and engine systems stretched across space while blue lights glowed along its armored surface. Entire districts of the floating city became visible beneath transparent shield domes. It looked less like a ship and more like a moving planet built entirely for war. Several Dominion captains immediately demanded retreat, but Kor shouted over them. "Hold formation," he ordered angrily. "It's still only one target." Inside Aegis, Jiho stood at the center of the bridge, while giant holographic displays tracked every enemy ship. Hannah monitored shield systems while Sora prepared fighter squadrons inside nearby launch bays. "Enemy fleet entering attack range," Hannah reported. Jiho remained calm. "Final warning?" Hannah nodded and transmitted the message across open channels. "Dominion fleet," her voice echoed through space. "You are now inside restricted military territory. Leave immediately or face destruction." Kor laughed when he heard the transmission. "Open fire," he ordered coldly. Hundreds of Dominion ships unleashed massive energy beams toward Aegis. Bright explosions lit the darkness around Saturn as enough firepower to destroy entire cities crashed against the fortress shields. But when the smoke cleared, Aegis remained completely untouched. Its glowing shield barrier absorbed every attack without weakening. Silence spread through the Dominion fleet. Then the fortress began to move faster. Giant engine systems burned like artificial suns while rotating weapon rings shifted into firing position. Inside Aegis, millions of civilians felt deep vibrations shake the city beneath their feet. Jiho gave the order calmly. "Activate gravity cannons." Across the surface of Aegis, enormous structures unfolded slowly like giant metal wings. Blue energy gathered between massive circular weapon systems while space itself seemed to bend around them. Several Dominion officers screamed in panic as their ships suddenly lost movement control. Gravity fields trapped entire formations in place. Admiral Kor stared in horror at the tactical screens. "Break formation," he shouted desperately. "Retreat immediately." But it was too late. Aegis fired. A silent wave spread outward across space, and entire Dominion battleships suddenly twisted apart like crushed metal toys. Massive cruisers folded inward under impossible gravitational pressure before exploding into debris fields. Smaller ships vanished instantly. The terrifying attack crossed through the enemy fleet within seconds, leaving only destruction behind. Panic spread across every surviving Dominion vessel. Some ships tried to flee while others fired wildly in every direction. Fighter squadrons launched desperately toward Aegis, but thousands of automated defense cannons opened fire across the fortress surface, turning space into a storm of explosions. Sora led human interceptor pilots directly into the chaos, destroying enemy fighters before they reached the shield barrier. Day followed close behind her, his fear disappearing as battle consumed the stars around him. Inside Iron Blood, warning sirens screamed endlessly while the command bridge shook violently. Kor watched helplessly as his mighty fleet collapsed before a single human fortress. "Impossible," he whispered weakly. "No civilization should possess this power." Then the central display showed something even worse. Several additional energy signatures had appeared deep inside the solar system. More fortress cities were activating. Jiho stood silently aboard Aegis while enemy ships burned across Saturn orbit. He felt no victory, only disappointment. Humanity had hoped the galaxy would listen after Neptune. Instead, fear and pride had pushed the Dominion into war. Hannah looked toward him quietly. "The surviving enemy ships are retreating." Jiho nodded once. "Do not pursue them, even after they attacked us?" she asked softly. Jiho looked at the burning wreckage floating across space. This battle was never the real war. Far beyond the edges of known space, hidden inside endless darkness between galaxies, something ancient slowly awakened. Massive shadows drifted silently through the void, while cold mechanical signals spread across dead stars. And for the first time in centuries, Humanity's greatest fear was beginning to move closer. The destruction of the Dominion fleet changed the galaxy forever. News channels across hundreds of worlds replayed the battle near Saturn again and again, showing enormous warships being crushed apart by the gravity cannons of Aegis, while terrified Dominion forces fled in chaos. Civilizations that once mocked humanity now spoke about Earth with fear and uncertainty. Trade routes near human territory became empty as merchants avoided the solar system completely. Some alien governments demanded peace negotiations with humanity, while others secretly prepared for war, afraid that humans planned to conquer the galaxy next. But inside Aegis, life continued quietly despite the growing tension outside. Markets remained open, schools continued their lessons, and workers repaired damaged defense systems after the battle. Commander Jiho walked through one of the upper civilian districts while ordinary families moved through crowded streets beneath the artificial sky. He noticed many civilians staring nervously at giant military screens showing reports from across the galaxy. Fear was spreading inside Aegis now, not because of the Dominion, but because people understood something terrible was coming. Humanity had revealed its hidden strength too early. Hannah joined Jiho beside a transport station where armored security teams guarded every entrance. Another Union delegation arrived near Mars, she said softly. This time they're requesting direct talks. Jiho gave a tired sigh. They waited until after losing a fleet. Hannah looked toward the glowing skyline of the floating city. They're scared. Jiho nodded slowly. They should be. Deep inside the Galactic Union capital, panic had replaced arrogance. Emergency meetings continued day and night while political leaders argued over humanity's true intentions. Some believed Earth planned to destroy every major power one by one. Others feared humans had built more fortress cities hidden across their system. The surviving Dominion officers told terrifying stories about Aegis moving through space like an unstoppable machine while entire fleets disappeared within seconds. Even Admiral Kor had vanished after the battle. His command ship was never found among the debris near Saturn. In response to the growing fear, the Union sent diplomat Mira to Earth under a flag of peace. Unlike many political leaders, Mira did not believe humanity wanted war. She believed humans were preparing for something far worse. Her transport ship entered the solar system carefully while human patrol fleets monitored every movement. Several hours later, she finally saw Aegis with her own eyes floating above Earth orbit. Even after hearing countless descriptions, nothing prepared her for the sight of the fortress city. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Giant shield towers glowed across its surface while thousands of ships moved through enormous docking ports beneath the artificial atmosphere domes. It looked like an entire civilization drifting through space. When Mira finally arrived aboard Aegis, she expected cold military halls and endless security checkpoints. Instead, she found crowded streets, restaurants, gardens, and families living ordinary lives beneath giant holographic skies. Children laughed near fountains while soldiers carrying rifles walked quietly nearby. Humanity had somehow turned a weapon into a living city. Jiho greeted her personally inside a secure diplomatic chamber overlooking the massive central district. Mira studied him carefully before speaking. The galaxy believes humanity is preparing to rule through fear, she said calmly. Jiho looked out the window toward the endless city lights. If humanity wanted conquest, we would have started centuries ago. Mira crossed her arms. Then why build this? Before Jiho could answer, Hannah entered carrying several classified data tablets. Her face looked unusually serious. Long-range probes confirmed new signals beyond the outer dark zone, she said quietly. Jiho's expression immediately changed. How many? More than before. Mira frowned in confusion. What signals? Jiho remained silent for several seconds before finally motioning toward the window. Come with me, he said. Hours later, Mira stood inside one of the deepest restricted sections of Aegis far beneath the civilian city. Massive blast doors sealed behind them while armed guards watched silently from every corridor. The air itself felt colder underground. Finally, they entered a giant chamber filled with holographic star maps and ancient data archives. Dr. Min waited near the center of the room beside floating images of dead star systems. The old scientist looked exhausted as always. "Diplomat Mira," he greeted quietly. "You wanted answers. Now you will receive them." Mira stared at the holograms showing dozens of destroyed planets and blackened systems. "What am I looking at?" Dr. Min activated another projection. The room darkened as ancient recordings appeared above them. Massive mechanical structures drifted through burning galaxies while entire worlds exploded beneath strange energy storms. Mira felt her blood turn cold. "This footage is impossible," she whispered. Jiho spoke quietly beside her. "The recordings are over 4,000 years old." Mira slowly looked toward him. "Who attacked those worlds?" Dr. Min answered before Jiho could speak. "We don't know their real name. Humanity calls them the Hollow." Silence filled the chamber. Dr. Min explained that during the final years of the solar collapse wars, human deep space probes detected signals far beyond explored space. At first, scientists believed the transmissions came from ancient dead civilizations. But later expeditions discovered ruined galaxies completely stripped of life. Entire star systems had been harvested by an unknown machine civilization that consumed advanced species before moving on to the next galaxy. Humanity kept the discovery secret to avoid mass panic. For centuries, Earth quietly prepared for the day the Hollow finally reached the Milky Way. Project Aegis was born from that fear. Mira listened in disbelief while ancient images showed destroyed alien empires far larger than the Galactic Union. "Why didn't you warn the galaxy?" she asked weakly. Jiho looked directly at her. Would they have listened? Mira could not answer. She remembered how the Union mocked humanity for centuries. Even the Dominion attacked after seeing Aegis for themselves. Deep inside the chamber, another alarm suddenly activated. Hannah quickly checked the incoming reports and her face lost color. "Outer listening stations stopped responding near the Perseus Gate," she said quietly. Dr. Min immediately rushed toward the holographic displays. "Show me." A moment later, the star map changed. Several distant systems near the edge of known space had gone completely dark. No communication. No ship signals. Nothing. Mira felt fear growing in her chest. "What happened there?" Hannah answered softly. "We think the Hollow have entered the galaxy." Across Aegis, emergency sirens began echoing through the enormous city. Military fleets launched from giant docking bays while civilians hurried through crowded streets in confusion. Jiho moved quickly toward the central command bridge with Hannah and Mira close behind him. Massive screens across the fortress displayed incoming reports from frontier colonies. Entire systems were disappearing without warning. Refugee ships fleeing from outer regions described enormous black structures moving through space surrounded by dead fleets. Survivors claimed ordinary weapons had no effect against them. Some refugees spoke about giant mechanical creatures boarding stations and stripping entire populations away within hours. Panic spread rapidly across the Galactic Union. The same governments that once feared humanity now begged Earth for protection. But even humanity looked afraid now. On the bridge of Aegis, officers worked desperately while giant tactical displays tracked the growing disaster near the galactic frontier. Sora entered wearing full combat armor after returning from fleet patrol duty. "Civilian evacuation routes are active," she reported. "Mars defense stations are preparing for lockdown." Jiho stared silently at the darkening systems across the map. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this exact moment. Yet seeing it finally happen felt unreal. The Hollow were no longer distant shadows hiding beyond dead galaxies. They were here. Mira stepped closer to the tactical display showing entire colonies vanishing one after another. "How many fortress cities exist?" she asked quietly. Jiho answered without looking away from the map. 5 are operational." Mira turned toward him in shock. 5. Hannah nodded slowly. Aegis was only the first. Outside the bridge windows, giant defense cannons slowly rotated across the surface of the floating fortress, while endless fleets prepared for war around Earth orbit. Deep in the darkness between stars, something ancient and merciless was moving closer with every passing hour. And for the first time in history, the galaxy realized humanity had never been building weapons for conquest. They had been building shelters for the end of civilization itself. The first true attack of the Hollow came only 6 days after the frontier systems went dark. Refugee ships flooded toward the inner galaxy carrying terrified survivors, who described impossible horrors moving through deep space. Entire planets vanished without warning. Military fleets sent to investigate never returned. Long-range sensors showed massive black structures drifting silently between stars while strange signals spread through communication channels like whispers from dead machines. Panic consumed the Galactic Union. Worlds that once argued over trade and territory now begged for protection as billions tried to escape toward safer systems. But nowhere felt safe anymore. Inside Aegis, Commander Jiho stood on the central bridge while giant tactical maps displayed dozens of collapsing colonies near the edge of explored space. One by one, bright stars on the map turned dark red as the Hollow advanced deeper into the galaxy. Hannah worked beside exhausted officers trying to track enemy movements, but the Hollow ignored normal battle patterns. They attacked without warning, appearing suddenly inside defended systems before wiping out fleets in minutes. Sora returned from patrol duty, covered in smoke and engine oil after escorting refugee transports from a destroyed mining colony near Vega Station. Her face looked pale as she approached Jiho. "We lost contact with the defense fleet before we arrived," she said quietly. "There was nothing left except wreckage." Jiho looked toward the tactical screens. "Did you see the enemy?" Sora hesitated before answering. "Only for a moment." The bridge became silent. "What did they look like?" Hannah asked softly. Sora stared at the floor before speaking again. "Like giant dead cities floating through space." Deep beneath Aegis, Dr. Min and his research teams studied every piece of data recovered from refugee recordings and damaged military probes. The images were worse than humanity feared. The Hollow ships were enormous biomechanical structures covered with black metallic growths that moved like living creatures. Some were shaped like broken planets while others resembled giant skeletons drifting through darkness. Ordinary weapons barely damaged them because the machines adapted instantly to every attack pattern. Entire alien armadas disappeared trying to stop even a single Hollow vessel. Mira watched the recordings beside Dr. Min while fear spread across her face. "How can anything survive against this?" she whispered. Dr. Min looked exhausted as he studied the incoming reports. "Humanity spent centuries preparing," he answered quietly. "But even we may not be ready." Across the galaxy, chaos spread faster than the invasion itself. Governments collapsed as frightened civilians rioted across major worlds. Some systems sealed their borders completely, refusing entry to refugees. Others surrendered without resistance after hearing stories of the Hollow destroying entire civilizations in distant galaxies. The proud Dominion, once feared by everyone, had already lost 7 core colonies within 2 days. Their remaining fleets retreated toward the inner sectors while desperate leaders begged humanity for military support. For the first time in history, the Galactic Union gave full command authority to Earth's defense forces. Humanity became the center of the galaxy's survival. 3 days later, the first direct battle between humanity and the Hollow began near the outer colonies of Jupiter. A giant Hollow fleet emerged from hyperspace without warning, surrounding the industrial moon stations orbiting the gas giant. Thousands of civilian ships attempted to flee while defense platforms opened fire desperately against the approaching enemy structures. Inside Aegis, emergency sirens echoed through the fortress city as Jiho ordered immediate deployment. "Activate all combat fleets," he commanded calmly. "Wake the remaining fortress cities." Across the solar system, hidden structures buried beneath moons and asteroid belts slowly came alive. Massive engines ignited beneath Mars while giant shield towers rose from the surface of Titan. Humanity's secret fortress cities awakened one after another like sleeping giants preparing for war. Millions of civilians watched the skies as enormous floating cities emerged from hidden construction zones across the solar system. Humanity had not built one fortress. They had built an entire defense network. Near Jupiter, Sora led human fighter squadrons through burning debris fields while civilian transports escaped toward Earth. The hollow ships moved silently through space, ignoring damage from ordinary weapons, while smaller mechanical creatures poured from their surfaces like swarms of insects. Human pilots watched in horror as destroyed enemy drones rebuilt themselves moments after being hit. Day flew beside Sora while explosions filled the darkness around them. "How do we stop these things?" he shouted through the communication channel. Sora fired missiles into a swarm chasing refugee transports before answering. "We survive long enough to find out." Suddenly, space itself trembled as Aegis arrived near Jupiter orbit. The giant fortress city emerged beside the planet like a moving continent covered in glowing weapons and shield barriers. Human and alien refugee ships immediately changed course toward the safety of the fortress. Jiho stood on the bridge while thousands of enemy targets filled the tactical displays. "Gravity cannons ready," Hannah reported. "Enemy adapting to previous firing patterns." Jiho narrowed his eyes, then changed the pattern. Aegis opened fire seconds later. Massive gravitational waves crashed into the hollow fleet, tearing several enemy structures apart instantly. But to everyone's horror, the remaining enemy ships quickly adjusted their formations. Strange black energy fields spread across the battlefield while the hollow adapted to the attacks in real time. "Their defenses are changing," Hannah warned. "The cannons are becoming less effective." Jiho watched silently as damaged hollow vessels repaired themselves with terrifying speed. Humanity's greatest weapons were already losing effectiveness. Across the battlefield, giant hollow drones crashed directly into defense stations around Jupiter, tearing through metal walls while mechanical creatures flooded into civilian sectors. Sora and her pilots fought desperately to protect evacuation routes, but the enemy numbers kept growing. Refugee ships exploded across space while burning wreckage drifted around Jupiter's moons. Day nearly lost control of his fighter after witnessing an entire station consumed by black mechanical growths spreading across its surface like living infection. "They're everywhere," he shouted in panic. "Fall back toward Aegis," Sora ordered immediately. Deep inside the fortress city, civilians crowded emergency shelters, while military officers rushed through the streets, preparing for planetary evacuation plans. Mira walked through one crowded shelter where frightened alien families sat beside human civilians under armed guard protection. For the first time, species that once hated each other waited together beneath humanity's fortress walls. Fear had erased old divisions. Nearby screens displayed live battle footage from Jupiter orbit while endless explosions filled the stars outside. A small alien child looked up at Mira with trembling eyes. "Will the humans save us?" he asked quietly. Mira stared at the burning battlefield on the screen before answering softly. "They're trying." Hours later, the battle near Jupiter finally ended after Aegis, and two newly activated fortress cities forced the hollow fleet to retreat deeper into space. But the victory came with terrible losses. Millions were dead. Entire colonies had vanished. Worst of all, Dr. Min confirmed that the enemy force near Jupiter had only been a scouting group. The real invasion fleet was still approaching from beyond the galactic edge. Inside the War Council chamber aboard Aegis, human commanders and alien leaders gathered around a giant holographic map showing hundreds of enemy signals slowly moving toward the inner galaxy. Even hardened military officers looked shaken by the scale of the incoming threat. Hannah activated another display revealing ancient records recovered from dead galaxies long ago. "The hollow consume advanced civilizations," she explained quietly. "They absorb technology, biology, even tactical knowledge. Every species they destroy makes them stronger." Silence filled the chamber. One alien leader looked toward Jiho with desperation in his eyes. "Can humanity stop them?" Jiho stared at the growing enemy fleet markers across the map. For the first time since the war began, he hesitated before answering. "I don't know." The room became deathly silent. Outside the massive windows of the chamber, Earth glowed peacefully beneath Aegis, while countless warships prepared for the next battle. Humanity had built fortress cities to protect civilization from extinction, but now even those mighty structures seemed small against the endless darkness moving closer through the stars. Far beyond the solar system, the true Hollow Armada finally entered the Milky Way. Thousands of giant black structures drifted silently together like a living storm large enough to consume entire star systems. And at the center of the fleet moved something so enormous that even the hollow ships themselves looked tiny beside it. Part 5. The final days of the war began when the full Hollow Armada entered the outer edge of the solar system. Every defense station, patrol fleet, and listening post detected the massive invasion at the same moment. Across Earth, Mars, Titan, and the fortress cities drifting between planets, emergency alarms echoed without stopping while millions of civilians looked toward the skies in fear. Giant screens across every human settlement displayed the same horrifying image. Thousands of black hollow structures moving together through space like an endless wall of death. At the center of the invasion traveled a colossal object larger than Earth's moon. A dark mechanical world surrounded by storms of broken metal and glowing red energy. Even experienced commanders became silent after seeing its size. Inside Aegis, Commander Jiho stood on the central bridge while the tactical display struggled to track the enormous enemy fleet. Hannah worked beside exhausted officers who had not slept in days, and every incoming report sounded worse than the last. Entire defense lines near Neptune had already fallen. Human fleets stationed near Uranus were retreating after suffering terrible losses. The Hollow were advancing directly toward Earth, destroying everything in their path without slowing down. Sora entered the bridge wearing damaged combat armor after returning from another battle near Saturn. Her face was pale, and dried blood covered one side of her sleeve. Titan Fortress suffered heavy damage, she reported quietly. They lost almost half their defense guns. Jiho nodded slowly. Civilian evacuation? Still ongoing. Silence filled the bridge as everyone stared at the tactical map. The final battle humanity had feared for centuries was now unavoidable. Deep below Aegis, Dr. Min and his scientists worked desperately inside the fortress reactor chamber surrounded by glowing energy towers and massive gravity engines. For weeks they had searched for a way to stop the Hollow permanently, but ordinary weapons no longer worked. Every battle only allowed the enemy to adapt further. Finally, after studying recovered Hollow fragments from previous battles, Dr. Min discovered something hidden inside the enemy network. All Hollow ships were connected through a central signal system controlled by the giant moon-sized structure leading the invasion. Destroying smaller fleets changed nothing because the main intelligence simply rebuilt them. But if the central core could be destroyed, the entire Hollow Armada might collapse at once. The problem was distance. No weapon in the galaxy could reach the enemy core through the layers of Hollow fleets protecting it. There was only one possible solution, and it terrified everyone who heard it. Inside the secure War Council chamber, Dr. Min activated a hologram showing the core of Aegis glowing beneath the fortress city. The quantum gravity reactor can create a system-wide rupture wave, he explained quietly. If detonated close enough to the Hollow command structure, it would destroy their entire network instantly. One alien commander stared at him in shock. That explosion would destroy everything nearby. Dr. Min lowered his eyes, including Aegis itself. The chamber became completely silent. Mira slowly looked toward Jiho. There has to be another way. Hannah spoke softly from the corner of the room. We've tested every possible option. Sora crossed her arms tightly. How close would Aegis need to get? Dr. Min hesitated before answering. Direct contact. The meaning became clear immediately. Aegis would need to fly directly into the center of the Hollow fleet and detonate its own reactor. A suicide mission. Several alien leaders protested at once, arguing that humanity could not sacrifice millions of civilians aboard the fortress city. But Jiho remained silent throughout the entire discussion. He simply stared at the holographic image of Earth floating beside the advancing Hollow fleet. Finally, after long minutes of arguing, he spoke quietly. Begin evacuation procedures. Hannah looked at him carefully. Jiho. He turned toward the officers surrounding the chamber. Transfer as many civilians as possible to the remaining fortress cities and planetary shelters. Military crews will remain aboard Aegis. Mira stepped forward immediately. You can't seriously plan to do this. Jiho looked directly at her. Humanity built Aegis for one reason only: to make sure civilization survives this war. Across the solar system, evacuation fleets launched non-stop while the remaining human and alien armadas prepared defensive positions around Earth orbit. Giant fortress cities moved into battle formation beside Mars and Jupiter, while millions of refugees crowded underground shelters across nearby colonies. Despite the fear spreading everywhere, humanity remained strangely calm. The people of Aegis had known the truth for years. From the beginning, the floating fortress had never been designed simply to survive. It had been built to stand against extinction itself, no matter the cost. Hours later, the final battle began. The Hollow Armada entered the inner solar system like a black tidal wave swallowing the stars. Endless enemy drones rushed ahead of the main fleet while giant biomechanical warships opened fire on human defense lines. Space erupted into chaos as thousands of ships clashed across Earth orbit. Massive explosions lit the darkness while broken fleets burned between planets. Sora led interceptor squadrons directly into enemy formations, fighting desperately to protect evacuation convoys escaping toward Mars. Day flew beside her through clouds of debris and burning wreckage while hollow drones surrounded them from every direction. "There are too many," Day shouted. Sora destroyed another enemy craft before answering. "Then we hold them anyway." Near Earth, the remaining fortress cities unleashed their full firepower together for the first time. Giant gravity cannons ripped through enemy formations while shield barriers large enough to cover moons absorbed endless attacks. Entire hollow fleets shattered beneath the combined defense network. But the enemy kept coming. For every ship destroyed, more emerged from the darkness behind them. Then the giant hollow command structure finally moved into view near Earth orbit. The enormous machine world blocked entire sections of space as red lightning spread across its surface. Its arrival alone caused nearby fleets to lose power while communication systems failed across the battlefield. Even Aegis trembled under the pressure of its signal fields. On the bridge, Hannah watched systems failing one after another. "Their core is disrupting our reactors," she warned. Jiho stood silently at the center of the bridge before finally giving the order everyone feared. "Prepare Aegis for direct collision course." Throughout the fortress city, warning sirens echoed endlessly as military crews sealed every section of the massive structure. Remaining civilians boarded evacuation ships while soldiers prepared for the final attack. Mira walked through crowded transport bays watching families leave Aegis forever while others chose to remain behind with the military crews. Some people cried quietly. Others stood calmly beside the windows, staring toward Earth glowing beneath the battle outside. Humanity understood what was coming. Deep inside the reactor chamber, Dr. Min and his engineers overloaded the quantum core, while energy levels climbed dangerously beyond safety limits. "Core stability dropping," one scientist warned nervously. "We won't get a second chance," Dr. Min answered softly. Outside the fortress, Aegis slowly broke away from the defensive lines and accelerated directly toward the center of the Hollow Fleet. Thousands of enemy ships immediately turned toward the giant fortress city, unleashing massive waves of firepower against its shields. Explosions covered the surface of Aegis while entire weapon districts collapsed under the attacks. But the fortress kept moving forward. Sora and the surviving human fleets formed a final escort around Aegis, sacrificing themselves to clear a path through the enemy armada. One by one, Allied ships exploded around the fortress while hollow drones crashed endlessly against its shields. Day watched entire squadrons vanish before his eyes as the battle reached its final moments. On the bridge of Aegis, Hannah looked toward Jiho while warning alarms screamed across every system. "Reactor overload in 2 minutes," she whispered. Jiho gave a small nod before looking out at the giant hollow command structure, filling the stars ahead of them. "Open all channels," he ordered quietly. Seconds later, his voice echoed across every surviving fleet, colony, and shelter in the solar system. "Humanity was never preparing to rule the galaxy," he said calmly while explosions shook the bridge around him. "We were preparing to protect it." Outside, Aegis crashed directly into the center of the hollow command structure as the overloaded quantum reactor reached critical failure. For one silent moment, all of space seemed to freeze. Then the fortress exploded. A massive wave of white-blue energy erupted across the battlefield, spreading through the hollow fleet faster than light itself. Giant enemy ships shattered instantly while entire swarms of drones went dark at once. The moon-sized command structure cracked apart beneath the gravitational rupture before collapsing into burning fragments. Across the solar system, every remaining hollow vessel suddenly lost movement and drifted lifelessly through space. The war ended in a single flash of light. Days later, survivors gathered across damaged worlds, while rescue fleets searched the debris fields surrounding Earth. Aegis was gone. Only broken pieces of the once mighty fortress floated silently where the final battle had taken place. But the galaxy had survived. Human soldiers stood beside alien civilians rebuilding shattered colonies while former enemies worked together for the first time in history. Mira later stood on a memorial platform above Earth orbit looking at the stars where Aegis had made its final stand. Around her, millions across the galaxy no longer spoke about humanity with fear. They spoke with respect. Humanity had built a city for war, but in the end, that floating fortress became the shield that saved every civilization in the galaxy from extinction.